I'm going to tell you a story to start. So when I was 8 years old, I also realized that I don't have the clicker, so I'm just going to tell you when to click. When I was 8 years old, my mom sat me down, and she said, "Schuyler, there's a bad man who lives on our street. And if this man ever makes you feel uncomfortable, if this man or any man tries to touch you inappropriately, you tell me immediately. I'll fix it. I'll protect you." I didn't quite understand what she was talking about. I was too young at the time, but the fear that I felt was clear. As I got older, I learned that a registered sex offender lived on our street, and my mom wanted to protect me from him. My mom had this conversation with me. My mom did not have this conversation with my brother. And that's because my brother is a boy, now a man, and I was supposed to be a girl. I was raised as a daughter, expected to be a woman. If you could just click forward, you can see the photos of me in high school. Thank you, cool. I spent my childhood being perceived like this. And I wasn't just any girl, I also am mixed race. I'm Korean American. And so in addition to the misogyny of just being perceived as a girl, I also was racialized. My experience as a mixed race person, I was often told, mixed babies are the most beautiful. Mixed girls are the sexiest. Mixed girls have it all. I was 9, 10, 11 years old when adults would say this to me. Teachers would say things like this to me. These comments did not make me feel comfortable. And for many reasons, I receded socially at the time, not quite knowing how to belong in my body, not quite knowing how to take up space at school specifically. I struggled to figure out if I belonged with the other kids of color, if I belonged with the girls as a fierce tomboy, if I belonged anywhere, I constantly felt not enough. And so instead of figuring out where I should stick in sport, to stick in school, I decided to dive into sport. And quite literally, I dove into swimming. And I sort of buried myself in the pool. The slides just they're doing their own thing. So I didn't touch anything. We're just gonna put that down. We'll get to that slide in a bit. But I dove into the pool, and I tried to really focus on swimming as my way to connect with myself when I felt so disconnected from everything else in the world. I got pretty good at swimming, quite competitive. I ended up being recruited to swim for Harvard University on the women's team. And as I learned more about myself as I got older, kind of going through my adolescence, I learned that I'm not this girl. Not this girl that everybody thought that I was. I'm actually a man, a transgender man. So at 18, I began to share my story and tell my truth to my peers, my friends, and gradually the world. At 19, I became the first openly trans athlete on a D1 men's team in college. Now, it's been 10 years since that point, and since I've been perceived as a man in the world. And yet that fear that I learned early on in my life of what it means to walk the world as a woman, as a girl, has never quite dissipated. In the early years of my transition, I remember walking around, and at this time, I've been consistently perceived as male in the world, and I was walking down the street at night. It was in the city, and I was walking home, and I heard somebody catcall me. And I immediately froze and felt a little bit uncomfortable. I turned to see who was behind me and if I could, give the guy a nasty look or at least ensure my safety. But as I turned around, what I saw behind me was a woman. And it was her who was being catcalled, not me. I said in my head, "Schuyler, they see you as a man, you are safe." Throughout my life in the past 10 years, this has been a repeated refrain. You are safe, Schuyler, the world sees you as a man. That fear that I learned early on that was reinforced throughout the whole world treating me as a girl, and that many of the women in this room, I'm sure, know, that fear sits deep in my chest because it is reinforced by the world. And yet I am able now, in the body and the presentation that I live in, to say, "Schuyler, you're safe. They see you as a man." My manhood is a shield. This is male privilege. And yet, privilege, and like most things, is not binary, it's not simple, it is quite complex. And so alongside the male privilege that I hold, I also carry my trans identity and complexity along with it. When I started on Harvard men's swim team, I had previously spent all of my years in the girls' locker room on girls' teams being perceived as a girl, and being sexualized by the high school boys on my team, so much so that my brother, who also swam on my team, wouldn't shower in the boys' locker rooms because he didn't want to listen to what the boys were saying about my body. So I went from that in high school, and then I walked into the locker room of Harvard Men's Swim and Dive, a D1 men's team locker room, and all the dynamics of what it means to be on a men's team smacked me in the face. I almost quit that first month on the team, not knowing how to hold space there, not knowing how to find my own belonging. Prior to being on that men's team, I had thought that men who catcalled women, men who said negative things about women or who treated women poorly were just bad. I thought that that behavior was so despicable that people who perpetuated could only be malicious. But I walked into that men's locker room and I saw teammates who I had respected repeat misogynistic jokes. And I wondered what was going on for them. I'd watch as they said whatever joke it was, and then they would scan the room, looking for who would laugh, who would smile, who would approve of what they said. And what I found was critical about my understanding about men and masculinity, and myself as well, which is that toxic masculinity is not actually usually malicious in intent. It's actually rooted in the fiercely human desire to belong, to be connected, to feel like you are loved and validated, that you should be in that space too. And I'm not immune to that either. There were many moments, especially that first year on the team, when somebody would tell a joke and I would feel myself wanting to laugh too. And I would criticize myself so strongly. Schuyler, you've been the object of that joke. You've been the victim of that joke before. How dare you want to laugh? But I wasn't wanting to laugh because it was funny. Believe me, it wasn't. I wanted to laugh because I too wanted to belong. And so in my years on that team, I tried to figure out, how can I connect in a different way? How can I reject the tools that are given to me and reject this ticket that is sold to me as a way to belong? Hatred sold as a ticket to belonging, sameness sold as a ticket to belonging, bigotry sold as a ticket to belonging. How can I reject that and buy a different ticket? Maybe make my own. How can I connect across difference, across identities that I don't share? And sport was a primary vehicle for this for me. We could have different backgrounds, different upbringings, different identities, but we all showed up at the pool at 6 a.m. We all were not so sure we wanted to jump in, but we did so anyways and practiced together, and that bound us together. Sport as a vehicle to connect with myself and my own body as well as others allowed me to envision a world in which more connection was possible. And I've built off that. Now I give in speeches all around the country and the world, and I've frequently spoken with audiences with whom I would never expect to connect. But after I talk, there's always several people that come up to me and they say, Schuyler, I felt that. I resonated with that. I've experienced that too. This connection that we don't expect is critical. Right now, in 26 states, at least around the United States, transgender kids cannot play sports the way that I have. They are barred, robbed of the capacity to be able to connect both with themselves and with others because lawmakers have decided that they don't allow them to play sports. This is feeding into the rest of the world with international federations banning trans athletes from competing as themselves as well. And this is not just about trans people. If you think that it is, you'd be wrong, because the reality is these boxes affect all of us. Every single person here, you have an experience with gender. Maybe you're not trans like me, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a gender. In fact, I bet that every single person in this room has felt not man enough, not woman enough, too masculine, not masculine, too feminine, not feminine. We've all been limited by this gender world that we're in. And so can we buy a different ticket? Can we step out of that box and connect with others and connect with ourselves in a way that allows us to move forwards? This poisonous anti-trans rhetoric is taking us all down. We all have something to gain if we invest in deconstructing it. This is not a time to sit and watch the game, to be on the sidelines. This is a time that I'm asking you, encouraging you to step into the ring, to dive into the pool, to step onto the field, because the stuff that really connects us is so powerful and so important. We all have a role to play on that field. Thank you so much.